Welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to create a simple Hello World component for the Joomla backend. While simple, this lesson gives you the basic starting point for any Joomla component. For Joomla 1.6 on, you're always going to need to start with a backend component, if for no other reason than to allow your site administrators to configure options and permissions for the component. But even if you don't have options and permissions, it's still a good idea. I've built some front-end only components in the past, and it actually increased my support because users didn't think it had installed properly. It wasn't appearing in the backend components menu. So when the next version rolled around, I put in a dummy about page for the backend, and my support calls went away. It's funny what people get used to. Okay, let's get this show on the road. I've imported my Joomla site into Eclipse, and I'm ready to create my component. We'll be starting in the Administrator Components folder. The first thing you need to do is create the base component folder. The name of this folder is important because it will carry through all of the work we're going to do in future lessons. I'm going to call this component hello, so my base folder is simply a com_prefix plus hello, all in lowercase. This com_hello folder will hold all the files that we need to run the component. This should be familiar because it's also used in the option variable in the URL. So we have our base folder, but Joomla needs a file to call to be able to actually run the component. This is the main component file, and it's a PHP file given the same name as the component. In this case, it will be hello.php. It's easy to remember because it's just the name of the folder without the com_prefix. This is the file that Joomla will load when we put option equals com_hello in the URL. The second file we will create is the Installation Manifest or XML file. This is the file that the extension installer uses to install files and data. We need this now because in a few steps we're going to get Joomla to automatically find this new component, and it will need this file to work. The name of this XML file is simply hello.xml. Next, I'm going to create a blank index.html file, and I'm just going to type in the bare minimum HTML markup. You could also copy this file from anywhere else in the system if you have one. We place an empty index.html file in each folder just to prevent a web user from browsing to these folders and listing the contents. Let's go back to hello.php, which you'll remember is the first file that Joomla loads. The first thing we always need to do with a PHP file is include the header doc block and a special line of code for security. I've got a snippet for this, and we just need to fill in a few variables. For the package, I use the name of the component or the name that I call the bundle of extensions if I package, say, a component with a few modules. For the subpackage, I simply use the name of the component folder. The package or subpackage should be all one word with no spaces. There are tools like PHP Documenter or Doxygen which use these markers to segregate API documentation they automatically generate from the code. You should also include your personal copyright statement in the header, and the license should always be the GPL version 2 or later to make it fully compatible with the Joomla source code. In this snippet, you'll also see an extremely important line that is the defined JExec or die line. JExec is a constant that is defined in the main index.php file for either the front-end or the back-end applications. In each file that Joomla calls, we add this check as a security measure to ensure that Joomla and only Joomla is accessing this file. This prevents users from directly accessing this file by typing in the full path in the URL of a web browser. If this line is not present, there's a risk that sensitive information can be exposed, or worse, if a security flaw is present in the file, a user could take advantage of this if they have directly accessed this file. It's also a good idea not to provide any message in the die statement. The less information we can give people snooping around the file system, the better. Okay, next we're going to fill in the XML manifest, and there's a useful snippet for that. I just need to fill in the name of the component and the date. The rest of the values I've already added defaults, and if you're using these snippets yourself, you can change these to whatever values you desire. So let's have a look at this file. The first line is called the XML prologue, and this line is a standard in any XML file. It's not unique to Joomla code. Your encoding must be UTF-8. The next line is an XML comment, which holds an ID marker for when you use a code repository like Subversion. We'll cover that in a topic another time. From line 3, we start the proper markup for the manifest. We open the XML with a tag called extension, and we must include attributes for the type of extension, the minimum version of Joomla on which it can run, and a method attribute. In this case, we need the type to be component, we need the version to be 1.6.0, and we need the method to be upgrade. There are a number of other tags which I'll explain in detail when we're looking at packaging the component. For now, we just need to make sure the name tag contains the name of the folder of the component, as does the menu tag in the administration section. We uppercase these two values, as well as the component description, as a visual aid to remind us that we add a language string for them to allow for future translation. Why I'm doing this now is because it will give us some nice results during the discover process and help set up the entry for the administrator menu nicely. So let's move to creating the basic language files for the component. In versions of Joomla prior to 1.6, we needed to have the language file in the main Joomla language folders. From 1.6, we can include a local language folder that Joomla will automatically pick up, and I recommend using this feature. There are two advantages. One is simply that all the files for the component are in the one place and not scattered around the Joomla tree. Two, and more importantly, is when you include multiple languages locally, they are not removed when a core language pack is deleted from the site. A user can uninstall a language and then reinstall it later, and your local language files will be unaffected in your component. The base language or language code of Joomla is en-gb. So we always need to provide that language file. First, create a new folder in the component called language/en-gb. Next, we create a file where the name is made up of the language code, dot, then the component folder name, then you give it a file type of .ini or .ini. This is the language file that will be automatically loaded when Joomla runs a component. We also need a second language file that is loaded by the administrator menu to translate the name of the component. This file is basically the same name, except we give it a file type of .sys.ini instead of just .ini. When we've created these files, we can copy that index.html file we created earlier and drop it into the new folders that we just made. Let's move to the .sys.ini file. First, I'll quickly add a snippet for the header of this file. For now, we'll just add what we call two language keys. The first is the name of the component folder that ties back to the name tag and the menu tag in the XML Manifest. The key must be typed in uppercase, and then the value assigned to the key must be enclosed in double quotes. This is more stringent in Joomla 1.6 because we are using the native PHP ini parser, which has much better performance than the method we used in previous versions of Joomla. The value, of course, can be anything you want, and for our case, the title of our component will be Hello World. The next key we want to include is the description of the component, which also comes from the XML Manifest. We just need to add that and give ourselves a meaningful description. Okay, so all of our basic preparation is done, and now what we want to do is add the component to the administrator menu so that we can get to it easier. This was a bit of an ordeal in previous versions of Joomla, but it's quite a simple process in Joomla 1.6. We need to go to the Extension Manager and click on the Discover link in the submenu. Then all we need to do is click the Discover button in the toolbar. Joomla should detect your new extension, and you should be able to see that the name of the component has been translated with the work we did with the language files. All we need to do now is check the box next to the extension name and then click the Install button in the toolbar. With those simple clicks, the extension has been installed into the system, and you can also see the component description translation is coming through as well. If we move to the administrator menu now, you can see that our Hello World component is now listed under Components, and we can have a look at it. Not terribly interesting, but no errors is always a good sign. Let's make this a little bit more interesting and jump back to the main hello.php file that we made earlier. For now, let's just put in a statement to echo Hello World to the browser. We'll jump back to the browser and then refresh the page. And there you go. We've built our first component for Joomla. Let Joomla discover it automatically and proven that it works. It's still early days, but these few steps make up the foundation for any component that you will build in the future. In the next lesson, I'm going to go through some of the theory behind Joomla's model view controller architecture, and then after that, we'll do an MVC version of Hello World. Have a bit of a play to make sure that your component is working so far, and then we'll see you back real soon.